Welcome everybody to another build and paint video, this time working on some 15mm Shermans. These are the plastic Sherman tanks that you've seen from the Plastic Soldier Company review video from a few weeks ago. And to begin with, I'm just starting with the build and making some improvements to the tank. First thing to do is fill in the sinkholes on the front of the tank. That's done with some Squadron green putty. And now I'm just scraping it flat. It's a quick and easy fill. The second thing I want to do is add some weight to the tank. It feels a bit light, a little flimsy right now, so adding some weight gives it more substantial, less toy feel to it. So I'm just gluing in some mounted GIs that I had left over from building some half-tracks a while ago, and they fit in there nicely. You can use anything though, it doesn't have to be a metal figure. The mantlet here has some eyelets on the sides, probably for lifting it with a crane. They are filled in on the kit, so I'm just drilling it out to add a bit more realism to the piece. Also getting drilled out here is the gun barrel. I'm not drilling a real deep hole here, just trying to drill a little nub out of the edge of the gun to give a sense that it does has some depth. Later on I'll put a little drop of black paint in there and look fine. Also want to add an antenna to it, so I need to cut off the existing nub of where the antenna is supposed to go. And then next drill out a hole. Once again using that same size drill bit. For the antenna itself, I'm using fishing line, 20-pound test fishing line. It's a little large out of scale, but I like the look. So I just cut off about a 6-inch length and just run it through my fingers several times. That helps straighten it out a bit. And usually what will happen is you take the 6 inches and you'll get around 2 roughly straight inches somewhere along its length. And so I just need to cut out those 2 inches. I prefer using an X-Acto knife because clippers will tend to fray the edges, and cutting with the X-Acto knife looks much better. And then once my piece is cut, just put a tiny drop of super glue on the end and stick it in the hole in the turret. It will have a slight curve to it, and you just want to make sure that's bent backwards for that added touch of realism. The kit comes with several options. This is a little shelf that can go on the back of the tank. It's completely optional and wasn't put on all Sherman tanks. Other options in the kit, just make sure you reference where and when they were put on, because not all of them went on every Sherman. You could add more stowage to the kit. Battlefront makes couple different stowage packs, but I wanted to keep these kits a bit clean. The last ones I built were covered with various crap, and I was just going for something a bit cleaner this time. I did add some tracks to the tanks, a few of the tanks. Shermans had very light armor, and so crews welded and strapped various things to their tanks to get any sort of protection that they could. So here's all 5 tanks built, and it's time for the painting. I'm going to be airbrushing the main colors and using brown violet. Brown violet's a fairly common color to use on US Shermans. They're not green, as a lot of people tend to think. When they came out of the factory, the paint looked almost black or a very dark green, but they faded fairly quickly. And brown violet's a good color to use. Now going on to the first dry brush layer here. This is the brown violet mixed with a little bit of game colored desert yellow. And hopefully you notice how forcefully I am dry brushing it. This is just the first layer, so I want to fairly heavily cover the tank at this point. And I'm using, a large brush. It's probably a 1/4 of an inch flat brush. And just trying to get it all over at this stage. This mix was probably 75 brown violet and 25 desert yellow. Might have been a bit light. I tend to be a bit subtle in my highlights. You could possibly skip that first step. Anyway, so now here we're going again, mixing in a little bit more desert yellow. And hopefully you notice I'm being a bit more cautious with my brush strokes here. I'm not forcefully dry brushing it, being just a bit more subtle because I don't want to cover everything I just covered with that previous layer. And here is the final one. This is probably 90% desert yellow to 10% brown violet. And once again, hopefully you notice, being very much more delicate with the dry brushing here, concentrating mainly on just the upper detail areas and doing it very, very carefully and being very soft with the brush. Now here's something I wanted to try. There's a technique with large-scale models called color modulation, and what you do is you paint any areas of the tank that are stuck on the main body, like hatches and bolts and rivets and gas caps and what have you. You paint them in a lighter color. The idea being once the paint's all done and completed, that those areas will kind of pop more. Those details will stand out greater. I don't think it's very realistic, but it does look really good. So that's what I'm trying here. This mixture is roughly the same as what I used for my second dry brushing layer, but because I'm painting it on rather than dry brushing it, it looks much brighter. And you can go fairly bright with this. The idea being once you weather it, it's going to tone it down, so it won't be as intense. So now I'm moving on to painting the tools. I'm going with a really light color for the wood here because I want it to stand out when the tank is done. So this is I believe yellow ochre with just a tiny touch of brown in it. The tools were actually much darker brown, but again, I really want things to pop in the small scale. Now for the metal tools, rather than metallic, I'm using a mix of German gray and neutral gray. I'm trying to move away from using metallics on 15mm scale models. My theory being that at this small of a scale, you will not get the metallic sheen that you normally would on up in a second here. Going to be painting, here we go, painting the road wheels using Vallejo Panzer Aces dark rubber. Here, so this is kind of a fill-in. I painted the edges of the road wheels in a rust color. It's a mix of the Panzer Aces dark and light rust colors. As the tracks go round and around, they tend to scrape the edges of the road wheels, and I could have gone for a metallic gray color, but I wanted rust to just add a bit more color to the tank. I don't want everything just to be gray and green. And I used the same on the tracks that are welded to the hull. The tracks themselves I airbrushed using a mix of flat brown and, to me, a flat brown and olive drab. And I'm just preparing to put them on the tank at the moment. When you put them on, notice that there are teeth only on one side. The teeth need to go on the outside of the road wheels, not on the inside. Now here are the tracks installed, and this is about the only disappointment I found in the kit. You see the teeth there on the tracks? They are supposed to rub against the road wheels. That's why I painted them the rust color. But they're way too far away, and I thought I was building them wrong, but turns out that's how they're supposed to go on the kit. So that's a bit of a disappointment. There's also a bit of a gap where the uh, tracks meet. So I filled it in with some green, squadron green putty, and now I'm covering up that with some brown paint. Luckily, my Vallejo burnt umber was a close match for the color I used on the tracks. And even if it wasn't, I'm okay with that because once everything's weathered, it's going to blend in just fine. The teeth on the tracks, I'm painting again with my rust combo, the light and dark Panzer Ace Vallejo rust colors. Um, and this isn't very realistic, but again, I'm just trying to add a bit more color to the tank. I don't want everything just brown and green. So tanks would not get this rusty normally because these parts are always moving and rust doesn't have a chance to form. So this is, artist prerogative here at this stage. You cannot do this at all, or you can paint them gray or metallic. Completely up to you. So now I've gloss coated them with a few coats of Pledge Future Floor Polish. Nice glossy sheen. You need to have a gloss coat for applying decals, which is the next step. Adding some micro set to where the decal is about to go. And going with a round star here. You have some options with the markings on Sherman tanks. They use various stars, star with the circle, star without the circle. Lots of tanks didn't have any markings at all because they were repainted and they didn't bother adding the markings, or some crews actually painted over the markings on purpose because they tended to act like adding some decals for the naming of the tank here. These names are decals are made by ID4 Enterprises. And normally you didn't have nice clean names on the Shermans, but I like the clean look of these things. If you want, you can hand paint names on the tank, but I think that's going to take a lot of work. This is much nicer. And on the other side of the tank, I'm adding an American flag. This is definitely artist prerogative. They did not paint American flags on the tanks. But again, it adds a little color, and I like it, and it's my tank, so I'm adding a tiny little flag. This flag decal is by Battlefront, though ID4 Enterprises does make flags as well. So here the tank is, the decals are dry, and I coated again with a couple coats of Future to protect the decals, and now I'm going on to some weathering using some Miggs Brown wash here. Shake it. And then I'm going to let it dry. I think I let it dry for about 45 minutes before I started to remove the wash. The longer you leave it on, on at this point. And using the brown wash adds a bit more brown color to the green of the tank. And I repeated this process twice. Let it dry 45 minutes, took it off, and then the next night I wanted a bit more brown look to the tank, so I repeated the process again with another brown wash and removed it. Okay, now we're getting some bit more highlights popping on the tank. Once that was dry overnight, then I went over with some MIG's Dark Wash, and this I carefully placed just in recessed areas of the model, like around the hatches and around that little round thing that I never figure out what that is, and around the recess of the engine compartment. So now the tank has been flat varnished a few times, and I'm adding a bit of muck to it with a Tamiya weathering stick mud color. Rather than use pigments, I like to use this stuff on small scale tanks because it's more like lipstick rather than pigment powder, and it holds up better to abuse, and also you can put a flat varnish over it if you need it. On this particular project, I'm being fairly subtle with it, but you could definitely do this over the entire tank if you want. So just thin it out with a bit of water, and basically you want to apply it just like a wash. And here I'm just going to be adding it inside between the bogies around the road wheels. I want this tank a bit cleaner. Last time I put this much effort into a tank and I covered it completely with dirt, and I lost all the detail that I worked so hard on painting. So this is going to be a slightly cleaner, dirty tank. Now that that's dried, I'm going in with a Q-tip that I shrunk down by pulling off some of the cotton and just rubbing off some of that wash, that pigment wash. So hopefully it looks a bit more realistic as it's run down and been splashed off the large flat areas around the bogies. And again, this is probably a bit too subtle to show up when everything's said and done, but today's experiment and just to show you what you can do with those weathering sticks. And here we go. All 5 tanks are done. Looking quite good and ready for the battlefield. Whole bunch of nice weathering, and not sure how long I took on this. 4 nights, maybe. This is probably a bit more work than you want to go to on small scale kits, but I go overboard and everything. I know it. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned. There will be some 360-degree views. Here we go of the tanks, and if you want to keep watching, this will be going around for a few minutes. Thank you, and goodbye.